You wake up and look in the mirror, but the person staring back feels like a stranger. You're successful by society's standards. You check all the boxes. You do what you're supposed to do. But inside, there's this hollow feeling that something fundamental is missing. You feel disconnected from who you used to be. Or maybe you never really knew who you were in the first place. You're living someone else's life, following someone else's script, and you can't remember when you stopped being yourself. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. Millions of people are walking around feeling lost in their own lives, going through the motions without any real sense of purpose or identity. They've been conditioned, programmed, and shaped by external forces for so long that they've forgotten who they actually are, underneath all the layers of expectations, trauma, and societal pressure. But here's what I want you to understand right now. You haven't lost yourself. You were never actually lost. You've just been buried under years of other people's opinions, society's programming, and survival mechanisms that no longer serve you. The real you is still there, waiting to be excavated, waiting to breathe again. This isn't about finding some mystical purpose or discovering your passion. This is about something much more fundamental: reclaiming your authentic identity and taking back control of your own mind. By the time you finish this video, you'll have a clear roadmap to strip away everything that isn't you and reconnect with the person you were always meant to be. Chapter 1. The Great Identity Theft. How you lost yourself without even knowing it. Most people think they lost themselves gradually through a series of small compromises and life decisions. But the truth is much more disturbing. You didn't lose yourself. You were systematically programmed to forget who you were from the moment you were born. This wasn't some conspiracy. It was just how society functions. But the result is the same. You became a stranger to yourself. Think about it. From your earliest memories, you were told what was acceptable and what wasn't. You were rewarded for certain behaviors and punished for others. You learned that love was conditional, that acceptance came with requirements, that being yourself wasn't enough. You had to be good. You had to be successful. You had to fit in. You had to make others proud. Slowly but surely, your authentic self was buried under layers of programming designed to make you a functioning member of society. Your parents, with the best of intentions, taught you to suppress parts of yourself that made them uncomfortable. Your teachers rewarded conformity and punished creativity. Your peers taught you that being different was dangerous, that standing out meant being rejected. Every institution you encountered had rules about who you should be, how you should think, what you should want. And here's the insidious part. You internalized all of this. You didn't just follow these rules externally. You made them part of your identity. You convinced yourself that their expectations were your own desires. You learned to police yourself so effectively that you forgot you were doing it. The prison became invisible because you became both the prisoner and the guard. Your subconscious mind, which was designed to keep you safe, interpreted authenticity as dangerous. Being yourself meant risking rejection, abandonment, failure, so it developed sophisticated mechanisms to keep you in line, to make sure you never strayed too far from what was acceptable. It created fears around being seen, around speaking up, around taking risks. It made you believe that who you really are isn't good enough. isn't worthy of love, isn't capable of success. The tragedy is that most people never realize this happened. They spend their entire lives trying to optimize a false self, wondering why nothing feels quite right, why success feels hollow, why relationships feel superficial. They're trying to find themselves in careers, in relationships, in achievements, not realizing that they're looking in all the wrong places because they're looking with the wrong identity. You developed what psychologists call a false self, a carefully constructed persona designed to meet external expectations, while your true self remained hidden, sometimes even from you. This false self became so sophisticated, so automatic, that you forgot it was a performance. You started believing your own act. The false self is incredibly adaptive. It learns what each situation requires and morphs accordingly. At work, you become the professional. With your family, you become the good son or daughter. With friends, you become the entertainer or the supporter. With romantic partners, you become whatever you think they want. But in all of this adapting and performing, the real you gets lost. This is why so many people feel like they're living multiple lives. Why they feel like imposters in their own skin. They're not mentally ill. They're not broken. They're just disconnected from their authentic self because they've been programmed to prioritize external validation over internal truth. The first step to finding yourself again isn't searching for who you are. It's recognizing who you aren't. It's understanding that most of what you think defines you is actually programming that was installed by others. Your preferences, your fears, your beliefs about what's possible, your ideas about what you deserve. Most of this isn't actually yours. It belongs to a false self that was created to keep you safe in a world that punished authenticity. Chapter 2. The Subconscious Prison. Understanding the internal mechanisms that keep you trapped. Your subconscious mind is running the show. And most of the time, you don't even realize it. While you're consciously trying to make decisions about your life, your subconscious is operating from a completely different set of instructions that were programmed years ago when you were trying to survive emotionally as a child. Understanding how this works is crucial because you can't escape a prison you don't know you're in. Your subconscious mind processes 11 million bits of information per second, while your conscious mind can only handle about 40. This means that the vast majority of your experience is being filtered, interpreted, and responded to by systems you're not even aware of. Your subconscious is constantly scanning the environment for threats, making predictions about what's safe and what's dangerous, and influencing your behavior accordingly. The problem is that your subconscious mind formed its core programming when you were young, when your survival depended entirely on the approval of others. Back then, rejection truly was life-threatening. A child who can't maintain the love and protection of their caregivers will literally die. So your subconscious developed incredibly sophisticated strategies to ensure you remained lovable and acceptable. These strategies worked brilliantly when you were 5 years old. They kept you alive, they kept you fed, they kept you from being abandoned. But now, decades later, these same protective mechanisms are sabotaging your ability to be yourself. Your subconscious still believes that authenticity equals danger, that being fully yourself will result in catastrophic rejection. This is why you feel anxiety when you think about expressing your true opinions. This is why you second-guess yourself constantly. This is why you feel safer blending in than standing out. Your subconscious has identified authenticity as a threat to your survival, and it will do everything in its power to prevent you from taking that risk. The subconscious communicates through emotion, not logic. You can't reason with it. You can't convince it that you're safe now, that you don't need to hide anymore. It operates on patterns and associations that were burned into your neural pathways through repetition and emotional intensity. Every time you were rejected for being yourself, every time you were criticized for speaking up, every time you were made to feel like you were too much or not enough, your subconscious recorded these experiences as evidence that authenticity is dangerous. One of the most powerful ways your subconscious keeps you trapped is through what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. When there's a conflict between who you really are and who you think you should be, your mind experiences uncomfortable tension. Most people resolve this tension by changing their perception of who they really are, rather than challenging who they think they should be. They convince themselves that they actually do want what they think they should want, that they actually do believe what they think they should believe. Your subconscious also employs a mechanism called the reticular activating system, which filters reality to match your beliefs about yourself and the world. If you believe you're not worthy of love, your reticular activating system will highlight every piece of evidence that confirms this belief while filtering out evidence to the contrary. If you believe that being authentic is dangerous, you'll notice every rejection while missing every sign of acceptance. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Your false beliefs about yourself cause you to behave in ways that generate evidence for those beliefs, which then strengthens the beliefs, which influences your behavior, and on and on. You become trapped in a reality that confirms your subconscious programming, making it seem like objective truth rather than subjective interpretation. Understanding this mechanism is liberating because it means that your current reality isn't fixed. Your sense of who you are isn't set in stone. The story you tell yourself about what's possible isn't based on universal truth. It's based on outdated programming that can be changed. The key insight is this: your subconscious mind is incredibly powerful, but it's also incredibly primitive. It doesn't distinguish between past and present, between real threats and imagined ones, between childhood and adulthood. It's still operating as if you're a helpless child whose survival depends on external approval. But you're not that child anymore. You have resources, options, and capabilities that your subconscious hasn't accounted for. Chapter 3. The False Self-Empire. Recognizing the elaborate performance you've been living. You've been performing for so long that you've forgotten you're acting. The false self you've constructed isn't just a mask you wear occasionally. It's an entire empire, a complex system of behaviors, beliefs, and identities that feels completely real because you've been building it your entire life. Recognizing this false self-empire is essential because you can't tear down something you can't see. Your false self-empire has multiple departments, each designed to handle different aspects of your life. There's the professional you, who knows exactly what to say in meetings, who never shows weakness, who always appears competent and in control. There's the social you, who knows how to be charming at parties, who laughs at jokes that aren't funny, who pretends to enjoy activities that actually drain your energy. There's the family you, who plays the role that was assigned to you in childhood, who keeps the peace, who doesn't rock the boat. Each of these versions of you has its own personality, its own way of speaking, its own set of values and priorities. They're all carefully crafted to meet the specific expectations of their respective environments. And they're all incredibly convincing, even to you. You've been method acting for so long that you've forgotten these are characters you're playing. The false self-empire is maintained through a sophisticated system of internal surveillance. You've developed an inner critic that constantly monitors your behavior, making sure you don't step out of line, making sure you don't reveal too much of who you really are. This inner critic knows exactly what each situation requires and adjusts your performance accordingly. But here's what's truly insidious about the false self-empire. It's not just about behavior, it's about belief. You've convinced yourself that you actually are these different versions of yourself. You've internalized the role so completely that you've lost touch with the actor underneath. You believe your own performance. This is why so many successful people feel empty inside. They've achieved everything their false self was programmed to want, but none of it feeds their authentic soul. They're like actors who've been playing the same role for so long that they've forgotten their real name. The success belongs to the character, not to them. The false self-empire is incredibly adaptive and intelligent. When one strategy stops working, it quickly develops new ones. If people-pleasing isn't getting you the validation you need, maybe perfectionism will. If being the responsible one isn't working, maybe being the rebel will. The false self is willing to completely reinvent itself as long as it can maintain control and avoid the vulnerability of authenticity. One of the most sophisticated aspects of the false self-empire is how it co-opts authentic desires and repackages them as false self-goals. Maybe you genuinely want to help people, but your false self transforms this into a need to be seen as the helper, the savior, the one everyone depends on. Maybe you genuinely love creating, but your false self transforms this into a need to be recognized as talented, successful, admired. The false self-empire is also incredibly expensive to maintain. It requires constant vigilance, constant performance, constant adjustment. It's exhausting because you're always monitoring how you're being perceived, always calculating what response will get you the desired outcome, always suppressing impulses that don't fit the character you're playing. Most people never realize how much energy they're spending on maintaining their false self-empire until they get a glimpse of what it feels like to drop the performance, even for a moment. That feeling of relief, of coming home to yourself, of finally being able to breathe fully. That's your authentic self, breaking through the facade. The tragedy is that the false self-empire was originally created to protect you, to help you survive in a world that felt hostile to your authentic nature. It's not evil. It's not your enemy. It was the best strategy you could come up with as a child. But what served you then is now suffocating you. The very thing that once saved your life is now preventing you from truly living. Recognizing the false self-empire isn't about judgment or shame. It's about awareness. It's about understanding that you've been living in a house of mirrors, seeing reflections of yourself rather than yourself. It's about realizing that the person you think you are is actually a sophisticated construction, and underneath that construction is someone much more real, much more alive, much more powerful than you've been allowed to believe. Chapter 4. The Archaeology of Authenticity. Excavating your true self from beneath the layers. Finding your authentic self isn't about discovering something new. It's about uncovering something that's always been there. Your true self is like an archaeological treasure buried beneath layers of conditioning, trauma, and social programming. The excavation process requires patience, curiosity, and the courage to dig through some uncomfortable material. But what you'll find underneath is worth the effort. The first layer you'll encounter is the layer of other people's opinions. This is the most recent sediment, the daily accumulation of judgments, expectations, and feedback that constantly shapes how you see yourself. You've internalized thousands of voices telling you who you should be, what you should want, how you should live. These voices are so familiar that they feel like your own thoughts. But they're not. They're the internalized critics, the phantom parents, the imaginary audience that's always watching and judging. To excavate through this layer, you need to learn to distinguish between your voice and the voices of others. Start paying attention to your internal dialogue. When you hear yourself saying, "I should," ask yourself whose voice that really is. When you feel shame about something, ask yourself who taught you that this thing was shameful. When you feel guilty about wanting something, ask yourself who convinced you that wanting it was wrong. This process can be unsettling because you'll realize how many of your thoughts aren't actually yours. You'll discover that beliefs you held sacred were actually just opinions you absorbed from people who may not have even known you well. You'll find fears that don't belong to your actual experience, but to stories you were told about what the world is like. Beneath the layer of other people's opinions is the layer of survival strategies. These are the behavioral patterns you developed to cope with difficult situations, to avoid pain, to get your needs met when direct expression felt unsafe. Some of these strategies served you well at the time, but many of them have outlived their usefulness and are now automatic responses that no longer match your current reality. Maybe you learned to be invisible to avoid criticism, so you developed a strategy of never speaking up, never taking up space, never expressing strong opinions. Maybe you learned that love was earned through achievement, so you developed a strategy of constant striving, never resting, never being satisfied with what you've accomplished. Maybe you learned that emotions were dangerous, so you developed a strategy of numbness, of cutting yourself off from feeling anything too deeply. These survival strategies feel like personality traits because you've been using them for so long. You might think, "I'm just an introvert," or "I'm just ambitious," or "I'm just rational," not realizing that these are actually learned behaviors designed to protect a vulnerable child who no longer needs that particular kind of protection. To excavate through this layer, you need to examine your automatic responses and ask yourself whether they're still serving you. When you find yourself defaulting to a familiar pattern, pause and ask, is this response appropriate to the current situation, or am I responding to a ghost from my past? Often, you'll discover that you're fighting battles that ended years ago, protecting yourself from threats that no longer exist. Beneath the survival strategies is the layer of core wounds. These are the original experiences that convinced you that being yourself wasn't safe, that taught you that love was conditional, that showed you that the world could be cruel and unpredictable. These wounds created the false beliefs that your entire false self-empire was built to protect you from. This layer is the most difficult to excavate because it contains real pain. You'll find the moments when you learned that your natural exuberance was too much, when you discovered that your sensitivity made others uncomfortable, when you realized that your unique way of seeing the world was seen as wrong or strange. You'll find the experiences that taught you to hide, to conform, to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for who you really are. But here's the paradox. You have to feel these old wounds in order to heal them. You have to acknowledge the pain that your false self was designed to avoid. This doesn't mean dwelling in the past or becoming a victim of your history. It means having the courage to feel what you've been avoiding so that you can finally move through it instead of around it. As you excavate through these layers, something remarkable happens. You start to catch glimpses of who you were before the world taught you to be someone else. You remember moments of pure authenticity, times when you were fully yourself without apology or explanation. You reconnect with desires that weren't influenced by what others wanted from you, preferences that weren't shaped by what was acceptable, dreams that weren't limited by what was practical. This is your authentic self beginning to emerge. It's not a new identity you need to create. It's an original identity you need to remember. It's the you that existed before you learned to be afraid of yourself, before you learned that love had to be earned, before you learned that being different was dangerous. Chapter 5. The Neurological Revolution. Rewiring your brain for authentic living. Your brain is not fixed. This might be the most important thing you learn today. For most of human history, we believed that the brain you were born with was the brain you were stuck with, that neural patterns formed in childhood were permanent, that personality was unchangeable. But neuroscience has revolutionized our understanding of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself throughout your entire life. This means that no matter how deeply ingrained your false self patterns are, you can literally rewire your brain for authentic living. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every behavior you engage in creates neural pathways in your brain. These pathways are like roads, and the more you travel them, the wider and more automatic they become. If you've spent years thinking, "I'm not good enough," there's a superhighway in your brain dedicated to that thought. If you've spent years people-pleasing, there's a neural network that automatically scans for others' needs and preferences before considering your own. But here's the revolutionary part. You can build new roads. Every time you think a different thought, every time you choose a different response, every time you act from your authentic self instead of your false self, you're literally creating new neural pathways. At first, these new pathways are like narrow dirt roads, easily overwhelmed by the superhighways of your old patterns. But with repetition and intention, these new pathways can become the dominant routes in your brain. This is why change feels so difficult at first. Your old neural patterns have momentum. They're automatic. They feel natural because they've been your default for so long. When you try to think or behave differently, your brain has to work harder because you're literally forging new territory. This is why your false self will resist change, why it will try to convince you that authenticity is dangerous, why it will create fear and discomfort when you step outside familiar patterns. Understanding this process is crucial because it helps you recognize that the discomfort you feel when changing isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong, it's evidence that you're doing something new. The anxiety you feel when expressing your authentic self isn't a warning sign, it's a growth signal. Your brain is literally being rewired. And like any construction project, there's going to be some temporary discomfort. The key to successful neuroplasticity is repetition with emotional engagement. Your brain pays attention to experiences that have emotional significance. So the more you can associate authentic expression with positive feelings, the faster your new neural pathways will strengthen. This is why it's important to celebrate small wins, to acknowledge moments when you choose authenticity over performance, to consciously appreciate the relief and aliveness that comes with being yourself. One of the most powerful tools for neuroplastic change is visualization. When you mentally rehearse being your authentic self, your brain fires many of the same neural patterns as if you were actually having that experience. This is why athletes use visualization to improve their performance. And it's why you can use it to strengthen your authentic self. Spend time each day visualizing yourself living authentically. See yourself expressing your true opinions without apologizing. Feel yourself making decisions based on your own values rather than others' expectations. Imagine yourself pursuing goals that genuinely excite you rather than goals that look impressive to others. The more vivid and emotionally engaging you can make these mental rehearsals, the more you're strengthening the neural pathways that support authentic living. Another crucial aspect of neuroplastic change is environmental influence. Your brain is constantly adapting to your environment, absorbing patterns and possibilities from the people and situations you expose yourself to. If you're surrounded by people who punish authenticity, who reward conformity, who make you feel unsafe for being yourself, your brain will strengthen the neural pathways that support hiding and performing. But if you can find or create environments where authenticity is welcomed, where being yourself is celebrated, where vulnerability is met with support rather than judgment, your brain will begin to strengthen different pathways. This might mean changing your social circle, finding new communities, or even just consuming different media that reflects the kind of authentic living you want to embody. The process of neuroplastic change isn't linear. You'll have days when your new patterns feel strong and natural, and other days when you slip back into old habits. This is completely normal. Your brain is literally rewiring itself. And like any major renovation, there are going to be setbacks and challenges. The key is persistence, not perfection. What's truly exciting about neuroplasticity is that it accelerates over time. The more you practice authentic living, the easier it becomes. The new neural pathways become stronger, while the old ones begin to weaken from lack of use. Eventually, authenticity becomes your new default, your natural way of being in the world. This isn't just about changing your behavior. It's about changing your identity at the neurological level. You're not just pretending to be your authentic self until it becomes real. You're actually becoming your authentic self by rewiring the very structure of your brain. Every moment of authentic expression is literally changing who you are at the cellular level, creating a new you that's more aligned with who you've always been underneath the programming. Chapter 6. Breaking the Addiction. How to Stop Living for External Validation. You are addicted to external validation. And like any addiction, it's slowly killing your authentic self. Every time you check social media for likes, every time you modify your opinion based on someone's reaction, every time you make a decision because of how it will look to others, you're feeding an addiction that keeps you trapped in a prison of other people's expectations. Breaking this addiction is essential to finding yourself again. But like any addiction, the withdrawal process is going to be uncomfortable. External validation addiction starts early. As a child, you learned that love, attention, and safety came through pleasing others. You discovered that when you behaved in certain ways, people smiled at you, praised you, gave you what you needed. When you behaved in other ways, people frowned, withdrew their attention, expressed disappointment. Your developing brain interpreted this as a life or death equation. External approval equals survival. External disapproval equals threat. This created a neurological reward system where external validation triggers the same dopamine release as drugs, food, or sex. Your brain became wired to crave the hit of approval, to feel anxious when that approval was withdrawn, to constantly scan the environment for signs of acceptance or rejection. You developed what psychologists call an external locus of control, where your sense of self-worth became entirely dependent on factors outside of yourself. The insidious nature of validation addiction is that it masquerades as social awareness, as caring about others, as being a good person. You tell yourself that you're just being considerate when you change your plans based on others' preferences. You convince yourself that you're being professional when you suppress your authentic opinions in meetings. You rationalize that you're being loving when you sacrifice your own needs to meet others' expectations. But here's the truth. Validation addiction isn't actually about caring for others. It's about controlling how others see you. It's about managing your image, maintaining your reputation, ensuring that people think well of you. It's a subtle form of manipulation where you perform goodness instead of actually being good, where you pretend to care about others' needs while actually caring only about their approval. The cost of validation addiction is enormous. When your sense of self-worth depends on external approval, you become a slave to others' opinions. You lose touch with your own preferences because you're so focused on figuring out what others want from you. You become exhausted from constantly performing, constantly calculating, constantly adjusting your behavior to get the response you need. Worse, validation addiction makes authentic relationships impossible. When you're addicted to approval, you can't actually connect with people because you're too busy managing their perception of you. You can't be vulnerable because vulnerability risks disapproval. You can't disagree because conflict threatens the validation you crave. You become a mirror, reflecting back what you think others want to see, rather than showing them who you really are. Breaking validation addiction requires understanding that the approval you're seeking from others can only truly come from yourself. No amount of external validation will ever fill the void created by self-rejection. If you don't approve of yourself, if you don't value yourself, if you don't believe you're worthy of love and respect, no amount of praise from others will convince you otherwise. The validation hits will feel good temporarily, but they won't last because they're trying to fill a hole that can only be filled from the inside. The withdrawal process from validation addiction is intense. When you stop seeking approval, when you start making decisions based on your own values rather than others' expectations, your brain will panic. It will create anxiety, fear, and discomfort because it interprets independence as dangerous. You'll feel guilty for disappointing people, scared of being rejected, convinced that you're being selfish or wrong. This is normal. This is your brain trying to pull you back to the familiar pattern of external dependence. The key is to recognize these feelings as withdrawal symptoms rather than accurate information about reality. Your anxiety about disapproval isn't evidence that disapproval is actually dangerous. It's evidence that your brain is addicted to approval and is struggling with the absence of that drug. To break the addiction, you need to gradually build tolerance for disapproval. Start small. Express an opinion that you know someone might disagree with. Make a choice that prioritizes your needs over someone else's preferences. Say no to a request that doesn't align with your values. Each time you do this and survive, each time you realize that disapproval isn't actually life-threatening, you weaken the addiction's grip on your mind. You also need to develop internal validation systems. Learn to notice when you've acted in alignment with your authentic self and celebrate that, regardless of how others respond. Develop the habit of asking yourself, was that true to who I am? Instead of, how did that look to others? Start measuring success by internal metrics like integrity, growth, and authenticity, rather than external metrics like approval, praise, and acceptance. The goal isn't to become indifferent to others' opinions or to stop caring about how your behavior affects people. The goal is to develop a healthy relationship with external feedback where you can receive it without being controlled by it, where you can consider others' perspectives without sacrificing your own, where you can care about people's feelings without making their feelings more important than your truth. When you break the validation addiction, something remarkable happens. You discover that the people worth having in your life actually prefer your authentic self to your performed self. You realize that genuine connections are only possible when you stop trying to manage how others see you and start letting them see who you actually are. You find that the approval you get for being yourself is infinitely more satisfying than the approval you got for being who you thought others wanted you to be. Chapter 7. Reclaiming your desires. Learning to want what you actually want. You've been wanting what you think you should want for so long that you've forgotten how to want what you actually want. Your desires have been so filtered through other people's expectations, social conditioning, and survival strategies that you can't tell the difference between authentic desire and programmed preference. Reclaiming your genuine wants and needs is crucial to finding yourself again, because your authentic desires are the compass that points toward your true self. Think about your current goals and aspirations. How many of them are actually yours? How many emerged from your own genuine interest and excitement versus how many were inherited from family expectations, social pressure, or the need to prove your worth? Most people discover, when they really examine their desires, that they've been chasing dreams that belong to someone else. Maybe you pursued a particular career because it was prestigious, stable, or what your parents wanted for you, not because it genuinely excited you. Maybe you're trying to achieve certain lifestyle markers, accumulate certain possessions, reach certain milestones, not because you actually want these things, but because they represent success in your culture. Maybe you're seeking experiences that look impressive on social media rather than experiences that actually nourish your soul. The problem with pursuing inauthentic desires is that achieving them never feels as good as you thought it would. You reach the goal you thought you wanted, and instead of satisfaction, you feel empty, confused, or already focused on the next achievement. This happens because you've been feeding someone else's hunger while your own authentic desires remain malnourished. Your authentic desires were formed before you learned what was acceptable to want. They emerged from your natural curiosity, your innate talents, your genuine interests, your unique way of seeing and experiencing the world. But as you grew up, you learned that some desires were praised, while others were dismissed, discouraged, or even punished. You learned to suppress wants that seemed impractical, unrealistic, selfish, or inappropriate. Over time, you developed what psychologists call learned helplessness around your own desires. You convinced yourself that what you really wanted didn't matter, that it was naive to think you could have what you actually wanted, that you should be grateful for what was available rather than reaching for what called to you. You learned to settle, to compromise, to be practical instead of passionate. This suppression of authentic desire doesn't just affect your goals, it affects your entire experience of life. When you're disconnected from what you really want, you lose access to your own motivation, passion, and sense of purpose. You become dependent on external motivation, pushing yourself through willpower and discipline, rather than being pulled forward by genuine enthusiasm. Reclaiming your authentic desires requires archaeological work, similar to finding your authentic self. You need to dig beneath the layers of conditioning to discover what still sparks genuine interest in you. This process often involves reconnecting with childhood interests that you abandoned because they seemed impractical or immature. It involves paying attention to what you find yourself drawn to when you're not trying to be impressive or responsible. Start by noticing what you're naturally curious about. What subjects do you find yourself reading about in your free time? What activities make you lose track of time? What conversations energize you? What problems in the world genuinely concern you? These are clues to your authentic desires, breadcrumbs leading back to who you really are. Also pay attention to what you judge in others. Often, the things we criticize or feel envious about in other people are actually reflections of our own suppressed desires. If you find yourself judging someone for being too creative, too adventurous, too outspoken, or too unconventional, ask yourself if there's a part of you that wants those things but feels like you're not allowed to have them. Your body is also a powerful indicator of authentic desire. Notice what makes you feel expanded, energized, and alive, versus what makes you feel contracted, drained, and deadened. Your physical response to different possibilities is often more accurate than your mental analysis because your body hasn't learned to lie to itself the way your mind has. The process of reclaiming authentic desires can be scary because it often reveals that you want things that seem impossible, impractical, or incompatible with your current life. You might discover that you want to completely change careers, move to a different place, end certain relationships, or pursue dreams that feel too big or too late. This is why many people prefer to stay disconnected from their authentic desires. It feels safer to want what seems achievable than to want what seems impossible. But here's what you need to understand. You don't have to immediately pursue every authentic desire you uncover. The goal isn't to blow up your life in service of every want that emerges. The goal is to acknowledge and honor your authentic desires so that you can start making choices that move you toward alignment rather than away from it. Sometimes honoring an authentic desire means taking concrete action toward it. Sometimes it means finding ways to incorporate elements of it into your current life. Sometimes it just means acknowledging that the desire exists and stopping the internal battle against wanting what you want. When you start honoring your authentic desires, even in small ways, something shifts in your relationship with yourself. You start to trust your own judgment. You begin to feel more alive, more engaged, more like yourself. You stop feeling like you're living someone else's life and start feeling like you're living your own. Your authentic desires are not random or arbitrary. They're connected to your unique gifts, your natural talents, your individual contribution to the world. When you suppress your authentic desires, you're not just depriving yourself of satisfaction, you're depriving the world of whatever you're uniquely meant to offer. Chapter 8. Authentic Decision-Making. Choosing from your core instead of your conditioning. Every decision you make either moves you toward your authentic self or away from it. Most people make decisions from their conditioning, choosing what feels safe, acceptable, or expected, rather than what feels true. Learning to make decisions from your authentic core is one of the most powerful ways to reclaim your life and start living as who you really are. Your current decision-making process is probably heavily influenced by what psychologists call cognitive biases, mental shortcuts that help you process information quickly but often lead you away from authentic choice. You make decisions based on what you think will get you approval, what will avoid conflict, what will maintain your image, what will keep you safe from rejection or failure. You've developed decision-making patterns that prioritize external factors over internal truth. You choose the job that looks good on paper rather than the one that excites you. You stay in relationships that are comfortable rather than relationships that challenge you to grow. You make choices that maintain the status quo rather than choices that honor your evolution as a person. This conditioning-based decision-making keeps you trapped in patterns that no longer serve you. You end up living a life that looks good from the outside but feels hollow from the inside, making choice after choice that moves you further away from who you actually are. Authentic decision-making requires developing what's called interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense what's happening inside your body and use that information to guide your choices. Your body knows things that your mind hasn't figured out yet. Your gut feelings, your physical responses to different options, your sense of expansion or contraction around various possibilities, these are all sources of authentic wisdom that your conditioning has taught you to ignore. When you're faced with a decision, instead of immediately jumping to analysis, comparison, and pros and cons lists, try pausing and tuning into your physical response to each option. Imagine choosing option A, and notice what happens in your body. Do you feel lighter or heavier? More energized or more drained? Do your shoulders relax or tense up? Does your breathing deepen or become shallow? Then imagine choosing option B and notice the different physical response. Your body often knows which choice is more aligned with your authentic self before your mind has finished analyzing all the variables. This doesn't mean you should make decisions purely based on feeling, but it means you should include your somatic wisdom as important data in your decision-making process. Authentic decision-making also requires what's called values clarification. Most people think they know what their values are, but when they really examine their choices, they discover that they're actually operating from inherited values, values that were programmed into them by their family, culture, or society. Take time to identify your core values, not the values you think you should have, but the values that actually drive your sense of meaning and purpose. What principles do you want your life to be organized around? What qualities do you want to embody? What impact do you want to have? When you're clear on your authentic values, decisions become easier because you have internal criteria for evaluation. Another crucial aspect of authentic decision-making is learning to tolerate uncertainty. Conditioning-based decisions feel safer because they follow familiar patterns. But authentic decisions often require you to step into unknown territory. Your false self will try to convince you to choose the option that feels more predictable, more controllable, more guaranteed to produce familiar results. But growth requires uncertainty. Authenticity requires risk. The choices that most align with your true self are often the ones that scare you the most because they require you to trust yourself in new ways, to believe in possibilities you haven't experienced yet, to act on faith rather than evidence. This doesn't mean you should make reckless or impulsive decisions. It means you should factor in your authentic desires and values even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. It means you should be willing to choose growth over safety, truth over comfort, alignment over approval. One of the biggest obstacles to authentic decision-making is the fear of making the wrong choice. Your conditioning teaches you that there's always one right answer, one perfect path, one optimal decision. This creates paralysis because you spend so much energy trying to figure out the right choice that you never actually make any choice. But authentic decision-making isn't about finding the perfect choice. It's about making choices that honor who you are in this moment, while remaining open to growth and change. You can make a decision that feels authentic today and make a different decision that feels authentic tomorrow as you continue to evolve and discover more about yourself. The key is to make decisions from your current level of self-awareness rather than from fear of future regret. You can't make decisions for who you might become. You can only make decisions for who you are right now. And who you are right now has wisdom, intuition, and authentic desires that deserve to be honored. When you start making decisions from your authentic core, your life begins to feel more like your own. You stop feeling like you're living someone else's script and start feeling like you're writing your own story. You develop trust in your own judgment, confidence in your own wisdom, and faith in your ability to navigate uncertainty. Your decisions become expressions of your authentic self, rather than attempts to manage how others see you. You choose based on what feels true rather than what feels safe. You prioritize alignment over approval, growth over comfort, authenticity over acceptance. This shift in decision-making has a ripple effect throughout your entire life. When you consistently choose from your authentic core, you naturally start attracting experiences, people, and opportunities that match your true self. Your external reality begins to reflect your internal truth because you're no longer making choices that pull you away from who you really are. Chapter 9. Building authentic relationships. Connecting through truth instead of performance. Your relationships are mirrors that reflect how you see yourself and how much authenticity you're willing to risk in connection with others. Most of your current relationships were probably formed while you were operating from your false self, which means they're built on performance rather than truth. Learning to build authentic relationships requires the courage to show up as who you really are, instead of who you think others want you to be. The relationships in your life right now can be divided into 3 categories. Relationships that support your authentic self, relationships that require you to perform your false self, and relationships that could potentially evolve to support authenticity if you're willing to risk showing up differently. Understanding which category each relationship falls into is crucial because the people you surround yourself with either help you remember who you are or help you forget. Relationships that support your authentic self are rare and precious. These are connections where you feel safe to be vulnerable, to express your truth, to show your imperfections without fear of judgment or rejection. In these relationships, you don't have to perform or pretend. You can disagree without threatening the connection. You can grow and change without losing love. You can be yourself without apology. Most people have very few relationships in this category. Because authentic connection requires mutual vulnerability. And vulnerability feels risky when you're not sure of your own worth. If you don't believe you're lovable as you are, you'll attract relationships with people who confirm that belief by requiring you to be different than you are to earn their affection. The majority of your relationships probably fall into the second category: connections that require performance. These are relationships where you've learned exactly what role to play to maintain harmony, approval, or acceptance. You know what topics to avoid, what parts of yourself to hide, what versions of yourself to present. These relationships might feel comfortable because they're predictable, but they're also exhausting because they require constant vigilance and performance. In performance-based relationships, you're not actually known because you're not actually showing yourself. The person loves or accepts the character you're playing, not the person you are underneath the character. This creates a profound loneliness because even when you're surrounded by people, you're still fundamentally alone with your authentic self. The third category consists of relationships that could potentially evolve into authentic connections if you're willing to take the risk of showing up differently. These are often long-term relationships with family members, old friends, or colleagues where the patterns of interaction were established when you were less self-aware. The relationship dynamic might currently be based on outdated versions of who you both are, but there's potential for evolution if both people are willing to grow. Building authentic relationships requires what psychologists call differentiation, the ability to maintain your sense of self while staying connected to others. This means you can care about someone without taking responsibility for their emotions. You can love someone without sacrificing your own truth to keep them comfortable. You can stay connected without losing yourself in the connection. Most people struggle with differentiation because they confuse love with enmeshment, caring with caretaking, connection with codependence. They think that loving someone means agreeing with them, that caring means never disappointing them, that connection means never having conflict. But authentic love actually requires the courage to be yourself, even when that's difficult for others to accept. The process of building authentic relationships often begins with what feels like loss. When you stop performing, when you start showing up as who you really are. Some people won't like it. Some relationships will end. Some people will express disappointment, anger, or rejection. This is painful, but it's also necessary because relationships built on false foundations can't support authentic connection. You have to be willing to lose relationships that require you to betray yourself in order to make space for relationships where you can be yourself. This doesn't mean you should carelessly discard every relationship that has performance elements, but it does mean you should stop prioritizing others' comfort over your own authenticity. Starting to show up authentically in existing relationships requires gradual boundary setting and truth-telling. Begin with small expressions of your authentic self. Share an opinion you've been hiding. Set a boundary you've been afraid to set. Ask for something you've been afraid to ask for. Notice how people respond to these authentic expressions. Some people will surprise you with their acceptance and support. Others will resist or push back because your authenticity challenges them to examine their own inauthenticity. The people who truly care about you will adjust to your growth even if it's initially uncomfortable for them. The people who don't care about you will try to pressure you back into the role you used to play. Building new, authentic relationships requires developing what's called secure attachment, the ability to form connections from a place of wholeness rather than need. When you're secure in yourself, when you know your own worth, when you're connected to your authentic self, you can form relationships based on genuine compatibility rather than desperation, loneliness, or the need for validation. You start attracting people who appreciate your authenticity instead of your performance. You develop the discernment to recognize when someone is trying to get you to play a role versus when someone is genuinely interested in knowing who you are. You learn to trust your intuition about whether someone feels safe for vulnerability. Authentic relationships are characterized by mutual growth. Both people support each other's evolution and authenticity, rather than trying to keep each other in familiar roles. There's space for disagreement without disconnection, for individual growth without threatening the relationship, for vulnerability without judgment. In authentic relationships, you can be imperfect without being rejected. You can have needs without being needy. You can express your truth without having to manage others' reactions. You can love someone without losing yourself. And you can be loved without having to be someone else. These relationships become mirrors that reflect your authentic self back to you, reminding you of who you are when the world tries to convince you to be someone else. They become safe harbors where you can rest from the performance that other areas of your life might still require. They become laboratories where you can practice being yourself until authenticity becomes natural instead of scary. Chapter 10. The Authentic Life. Integrating your true self into every area of your existence. Living authentically isn't just about knowing who you are. It's about having the courage to be who you are in every area of your life. This is where most people get stuck. They do the inner work. They discover their authentic self. They have moments of clarity and connection, but then they struggle to integrate this authenticity into their daily reality. They end up living compartmentalized lives where they're authentic in some areas but still performing in others. True authenticity requires what psychologists call congruence, the alignment between your inner truth and your outer expression. This doesn't mean you have to be exactly the same in every context. Different situations naturally call for different aspects of yourself. But it does mean that none of these expressions should require you to betray your core values, suppress your genuine nature, or pretend to be someone you're not. The workplace is often the most challenging arena for authentic expression. Most professional environments reward conformity, discourage vulnerability, and punish anything that rocks the boat. You've probably learned to wear a professional mask, to speak in corporate language, to hide your personality behind a facade of competence and appropriateness. But working in environments that require you to suppress your authentic self is slowly killing your spirit. Every day you spend pretending to be someone else at work is a day you spend disconnected from your own life force. The stress of constant performance, the exhaustion of hiding who you are, the frustration of not being able to express your ideas and talents fully, all of this accumulates into what researchers call occupational burnout. Integrating authenticity into your work life might require significant changes. You might need to find a different job, start your own business, or negotiate more autonomy in your current role. You might need to develop the courage to express your ideas more freely, to set boundaries that protect your authentic self, or to pursue work that aligns with your genuine interests and values. This doesn't mean you should be completely unfiltered or inappropriate at work. Professional authenticity means being genuinely yourself within appropriate professional boundaries. It means expressing your ideas with confidence, contributing your unique perspective, and bringing your natural talents to your work without hiding behind a false professional persona. Your living environment is another area where authenticity matters. The space you inhabit should reflect who you are, not who you think you should be or who you're trying to impress. Many people live in spaces that look good on Instagram but don't actually support their authentic lifestyle. They have furniture that's uncomfortable but stylish, art that's impressive but meaningless to them, belongings that represent status but not personality. Creating an authentic living environment means surrounding yourself with things that genuinely bring you joy, comfort, and inspiration. It means designing a space that supports your authentic activities and interests rather than your imaginary ideal self. It means investing in things that you actually use and love rather than things that look good but gather dust. Your daily routines and habits are also expressions of authenticity or inauthenticity. Many people structure their days around what they think productive people do rather than what actually works for their unique rhythm and energy. They force themselves into morning routines that don't fit their natural schedule, productivity systems that don't match their working style, or exercise regimens that don't align with their physical preferences. Authentic daily living means designing routines that honor your natural rhythms, energy patterns, and genuine preferences. This might mean working different hours than what's conventional if you have that flexibility. It might mean exercising in ways that feel joyful rather than punishing. It might mean eating foods that make your body feel good rather than foods that fit the latest diet trend. Your financial choices are also expressions of your values and authenticity. When you spend money on things that don't align with your genuine priorities, you're voting for a version of yourself that isn't real. When you go into debt to maintain an image that doesn't reflect your authentic values, you're literally paying to suppress who you really are. Authentic financial living means aligning your spending with your genuine values and priorities. It means investing in experiences, things, and causes that actually matter to you, rather than things that look impressive or make you appear successful. It might mean spending less on status symbols and more on experiences that feed your soul. It might mean earning less money doing work you love, rather than more money doing work that crushes your spirit. Perhaps the most important aspect of integrated authentic living is learning to make decisions from your authentic self rather than your conditioned self. Every choice point in your day is an opportunity to choose authenticity or performance, truth or safety, growth or comfort. This requires developing what mindfulness teachers call present moment awareness. Instead of operating on autopilot, reacting from old patterns and conditioning, you learn to pause and check in with your authentic self before responding to situations. You ask yourself questions like, what would be most true for me right now? What choice would I make if I weren't afraid of others' reactions? How can I honor my authentic self in this situation? The goal isn't perfection. You don't have to be perfectly authentic in every moment. The goal is conscious choice. The goal is gradually increasing the percentage of your life that feels aligned with who you really are. The goal is building momentum toward authenticity so that being yourself becomes easier than pretending to be someone else. When you successfully integrate authenticity into all areas of your life, something profound happens. You stop feeling like you're living multiple lives or wearing different masks for different people. You develop a sense of wholeness, of integrity, of being the same person regardless of context. You feel at home in your own life because your life actually reflects who you are. This doesn't mean your life becomes perfect or easy. Authentic living often requires difficult choices, uncomfortable conversations, and the courage to disappoint people whose approval you used to crave. But it does mean your life becomes yours. Your struggles become authentic struggles. Your joys become authentic joys. Your growth becomes authentic growth. You stop feeling like an actor in someone else's play and start feeling like the author of your own story. You stop waiting for permission to be yourself and start granting yourself that permission. You stop looking for yourself in external achievements and start finding yourself in every authentic moment of every authentic day. Chapter 11. Handling the resistance. What to do when the world pushes back against your authentic self. The moment you start living authentically, the world will test you. People who are comfortable with your false self will resist your evolution. Systems that benefited from your compliance will push back against your independence. Your own subconscious mind will create fear and doubt to try to pull you back to familiar patterns. This resistance isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something powerful. Understanding how to navigate this resistance is crucial because most people give up on authenticity the moment it becomes challenging. Resistance comes in many forms, and recognizing these patterns will help you stay strong when they appear. The first type is social resistance. Family members who assigned you a role in their dysfunctional system will pressure you to go back to playing that role. Friends who were comfortable with you as a people pleaser will express disappointment when you start setting boundaries. Colleagues who benefited from your overwork will guilt you when you start protecting your time and energy. This social resistance often disguises itself as caring. People will tell you that you've changed, that you're not the same person they used to know, that they're worried about you. They'll express concern that you're being selfish, irresponsible, or unrealistic. They'll remind you of your obligations, your commitments, your responsibilities to others. What they're really expressing is their discomfort with your growth because your authenticity forces them to confront their own inauthenticity. The second type is systemic resistance. Organizations, institutions, and social structures are designed to maintain the status quo. They reward conformity and punish authenticity because authentic people are harder to control, harder to exploit, harder to manipulate. When you start expressing your authentic self at work, you might face subtle retaliation, being passed over for promotions, or being labeled as difficult. When you start making choices based on your values rather than social expectations, you might find yourself excluded from certain opportunities or communities. The third type is internal resistance. Your own subconscious mind, programmed by years of conditioning, will create internal obstacles to authentic living. You'll experience anxiety when expressing your true opinions, guilt when setting boundaries, fear when pursuing authentic desires. Your inner critic will become louder, telling you that you're being unrealistic, that you should be grateful for what you have, that you're going to lose everything if you continue on this path. This internal resistance is often the most challenging because it feels like your own authentic voice telling you to stop. But it's not your authentic voice. It's your programming trying to protect you from imaginary dangers. The fear you feel about living authentically isn't based on current reality. It's based on childhood experiences when authenticity actually was dangerous. Understanding the psychology of resistance helps you respond strategically rather than reactively. When people resist your authenticity, they're often projecting their own fears onto you. They see you choosing growth over safety, truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and it triggers their own unresolved issues about these choices. They're not really trying to help you. They're trying to manage their own anxiety about what your changes might mean for their own lives. The key to handling social resistance is maintaining what psychologists call emotional differentiation. You can acknowledge other people's discomfort without taking responsibility for it. You can care about their feelings without sacrificing your truth to manage those feelings. You can love someone while still disappointing them. This doesn't mean you should be callous or inconsiderate, but it does mean you shouldn't abandon your authentic path just because it makes others uncomfortable. When facing systemic resistance, remember that systems resist change precisely because change threatens their control. The fact that an organization or institution is pushing back against your authenticity doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're challenging a structure that benefits from your compliance. Sometimes, this means you need to find different systems that align with your authentic values. And sometimes, it means you need to create new systems that support authenticity. Internal resistance requires a different approach because it's coming from within your own mind. The key is learning to distinguish between authentic intuition and conditioned fear. Authentic intuition feels expansive, even when it's scary. It aligns with your values and draws you toward growth. Conditioned fear feels contractive and pulls you toward familiar patterns of safety and control. When you feel internal resistance, pause and ask yourself, is this fear protecting me from real danger, or is it protecting me from growth? Real danger requires immediate attention and appropriate action. Growth-related fear requires courage and forward movement despite the discomfort. One of the most effective strategies for handling resistance is what resilience researchers call stress inoculation. Just as your immune system gets stronger by exposure to small doses of pathogens, your authenticity muscles get stronger by handling progressively larger challenges to your authentic expression. Start with small acts of authenticity in low-stakes situations. Build your tolerance for discomfort, and gradually work up to bigger expressions of truth in more challenging contexts. Another crucial strategy is building what psychologists call a secure base, a foundation of support that remains stable even when other relationships become turbulent. This might include authentic friendships, supportive communities, therapeutic relationships, or spiritual practices that remind you of your worth and truth when the world is telling you to be someone else. Document your wins and growth throughout this process. When resistance feels overwhelming, it's easy to forget how far you've come and how much stronger you've become. Keep a record of moments when you chose authenticity over approval, when you set boundaries successfully, when you expressed your truth despite fear. This evidence becomes a resource you can draw on when doubt creeps in. Remember that resistance often intensifies right before breakthrough. This phenomenon, known in psychology as an extinction burst, occurs when old patterns fight hardest just before they lose their power. When resistance feels most intense, it often means you're on the verge of a significant shift toward authentic living. The ultimate reframe for resistance is seeing it as feedback rather than failure. Every person who pushes back against your authenticity is showing you where you still need to strengthen your sense of self. Every institution that resists your truth is revealing its investment in keeping you small. Every internal fear that arises is pointing toward an area where you can develop more courage and trust in yourself. You don't need everyone to approve of your authentic self. You don't need every system to support your truth. You don't need to eliminate all internal resistance before moving forward. You just need to develop the resilience to keep choosing authenticity even when it's challenging. Because on the other side of resistance lies the most powerful version of yourself you've ever imagined. Chapter 12. The Authenticity Mastery System. Creating unshakable alignment between who you are and how you live. Mastery is not about perfection. It's about developing such deep alignment between your inner truth and outer expression that authenticity becomes your natural default rather than something you have to constantly choose. Most people treat authenticity like a part-time hobby, something they practice when it's convenient or safe. But true masters of authentic living have created systems, practices, and mindsets that make inauthenticity harder than authenticity. The foundation of authenticity mastery is what psychologists call integrated identity. Instead of having multiple selves for different contexts, you develop one coherent self that expresses differently in different situations but never betrays its core essence. This doesn't mean you're exactly the same in every environment, but it does mean that all your expressions flow from the same authentic source. Building integrated identity requires deep self-knowledge that goes beyond surface-level personality assessments. You need to understand your core values so clearly that you can recognize when situations or relationships are pulling you away from them. You need to know your authentic desires so intimately that you can distinguish them from conditioned wants. You need to understand your natural rhythms, energy patterns, and ways of processing information so well that you can design a life that works with your nature instead of against it. This level of self-knowledge requires what mindfulness teachers call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thought processes, emotional patterns, and behavioral tendencies with curiosity rather than judgment. Most people are so identified with their thoughts and feelings that they can't see the patterns that drive their choices. Masters of authenticity develop the capacity to step back and observe themselves with the same objectivity they might observe someone else. The second pillar of authenticity mastery is emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel your emotions fully without being controlled by them. Most people either suppress their emotions to avoid discomfort or are overwhelmed by them and make decisions from reactive states. Authentic masters learn to experience their emotions as information rather than instruction, using their feelings as data about their needs, values, and boundaries, while making choices from their centered, conscious self. Emotional sovereignty requires developing what researchers call distress tolerance, the ability to remain present and functional, even when experiencing difficult emotions like fear, anger, sadness, or anxiety. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb. It means expanding your capacity to feel without losing your grounding. When you're no longer afraid of your own emotions, you stop making decisions based on avoiding emotional discomfort and start making decisions based on authentic alignment. The third pillar is relational authenticity, the ability to remain yourself while deeply connected to others. Many people think they have to choose between authenticity and connection, but masters understand that authentic connection is only possible when both people are being genuine. This requires developing secure attachment patterns where you can love without losing yourself, and be loved without having to be someone else. Relational authenticity involves mastering what psychologists call assertive communication, the ability to express your truth clearly and directly while remaining respectful of others' experiences. This is different from aggressive communication, which dominates others, and passive communication, which suppresses your truth. Assertive communication allows you to set boundaries, express disagreement, make requests, and share vulnerable truths without attacking others or abandoning yourself. The fourth pillar is what I call choice architecture. Deliberately designing your life so that authentic choices become easier than inauthentic ones. This means creating environments, relationships, routines, and systems that support your authentic self and make it harder to slip back into old patterns of performance and people-pleasing. Choice architecture might involve changing your physical environment to reflect your authentic tastes and support your authentic activities. It might mean restructuring your schedule to honor your natural rhythms and energy levels. It might involve changing your social environment to include more people who appreciate authenticity and fewer people who reward performance. It might mean changing your financial structure so you're not dependent on income sources that require you to suppress your authentic self. The fifth pillar is adaptive resilience, the ability to remain authentic even under pressure, stress, or uncertainty. Life will always present challenges, setbacks, and unexpected changes. Masters of authenticity develop the capacity to navigate these difficulties without abandoning their authentic self or reverting to old survival strategies. Adaptive resilience is built through what researchers call deliberate practice in authenticity. Just as athletes train under increasingly difficult conditions to build performance under pressure, authenticity masters practice expressing their truth in progressively challenging situations. They build tolerance for discomfort, disappointment, and disapproval so that these experiences don't derail their commitment to authentic living. The sixth pillar is continuous evolution. The understanding that authenticity is not a fixed destination, but an ongoing process of growth and discovery. Your authentic self is not static. It continues to evolve as you have new experiences, learn new things, and develop new capacities. Masters remain open to these changes, rather than trying to lock themselves into a particular identity. This requires what researchers call psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt your behavior to match your evolving values and circumstances while maintaining your core integrity. You might discover new aspects of yourself that surprise you, develop interests that don't fit your previous self-image, or feel called to make changes that seem inconsistent with who you used to be. Masters trust this evolution rather than resisting it. The seventh pillar is what I call authentic impact, the ability to contribute to the world from your genuine gifts and interests, rather than from obligation, guilt, or the need to prove your worth. Masters understand that their authentic contribution is not only more satisfying, but also more effective because it draws from their natural talents and genuine passion. Creating authentic impact requires understanding your unique value proposition, the specific combination of gifts, experiences, perspectives, and passions that only you can offer. This isn't about being the best at something in the traditional sense. It's about being the most authentic version of yourself and sharing that authenticity in ways that serve others. The mastery system integrates all these pillars into a coherent approach to authentic living. It's not enough to work on one area while neglecting others. True mastery requires developing all these capacities simultaneously, and understanding how they reinforce each other. Masters of authenticity have moved beyond the need to constantly choose between authenticity and acceptance because they've created lives where these are aligned. They've found people who appreciate their genuine self, created work that utilizes their authentic gifts, designed environments that support their true nature, and developed the inner resources to remain centered regardless of external circumstances. This is not about perfection or never struggling. Masters still face challenges, still experience difficult emotions, still sometimes feel pulled toward old patterns. The difference is that they have systems and practices that help them navigate these challenges without losing their authentic center. They've made authenticity so integrated into their identity and lifestyle that being anything else requires more effort than being themselves. Chapter 13. Advanced Authenticity. Navigating the complex challenges of deep, authentic living. Once you've established a foundation of authentic living, you'll encounter more sophisticated challenges that most people never reach because they never get past the basics. These advanced challenges require nuanced understanding and sophisticated responses because they arise not from fear of authenticity, but from the complexities of living authentically in a world that's still largely organized around performance and conformity. One of the most significant advanced challenges is what researchers call the authenticity paradox. This occurs when your authentic self contains contradictions, complexities, or aspects that seem inconsistent with each other. You might be simultaneously ambitious and contemplative, social and solitary, confident and vulnerable, rational and intuitive. Most people try to resolve these contradictions by choosing one side and suppressing the other. But authentic masters learn to hold paradox without trying to eliminate it. The authenticity paradox becomes particularly challenging when different aspects of your authentic self seem to conflict with each other. Maybe your authentic desire for creative expression conflicts with your authentic need for financial security. Maybe your authentic value of honesty conflicts with your authentic value of kindness when telling the truth might hurt someone. Maybe your authentic need for independence conflicts with your authentic desire for deep connection. Navigating these contradictions requires what psychologists call dialectical thinking, the ability to hold multiple truths simultaneously without trying to resolve them into a single answer. Instead of seeing contradiction as a problem to solve, you learn to see it as the natural complexity of being human. You develop the capacity to honor different aspects of yourself in different contexts while maintaining overall integrity. Another advanced challenge is authentic expression in power dynamics. When you're in positions of authority or influence, authenticity becomes more complicated because your authentic expression affects others more significantly. Leaders who are too authentic without wisdom can create chaos. Parents who express every authentic feeling can overwhelm their children. People in helping professions who lack boundaries around authenticity can become ineffective or harmful. Advanced authenticity requires developing what researchers call contextual sensitivity, the ability to express your authentic self appropriately for different situations, while never betraying your core integrity. This isn't about performance or manipulation. It's about understanding how to be genuinely yourself in ways that serve the situation and the people involved. A particularly sophisticated challenge is maintaining authenticity in intimate relationships where your partner is still operating from their false self. When you're committed to authentic living but your romantic partner, family members, or close friends are still trapped in performance, you face the challenge of remaining true to yourself while navigating relationships with people who might interpret your authenticity as judgment, abandonment, or threat. This requires what relationship therapists call differentiated intimacy, the ability to remain close to someone while maintaining your own separate identity and truth. You learn to love people where they are, without requiring them to be authentic before you can be authentic with them. You develop the capacity to be vulnerable and real without demanding the same level of authenticity in return. Another advanced challenge is what I call authentic leadership, the ability to guide and influence others from your genuine self, rather than from role expectations or power dynamics. Many people in leadership positions feel like they have to adopt a leadership persona that might not align with their authentic nature. Advanced authenticity requires learning to lead from your genuine gifts and style, while still fulfilling your responsibilities to others. This might mean discovering that your authentic leadership style is quieter, more collaborative, or more intuitive than traditional leadership models. It might mean finding ways to incorporate your genuine values and passions into your leadership approach. It requires developing confidence that your authentic way of leading can be effective even if it doesn't match conventional expectations. The challenge of authentic creativity presents another sophisticated frontier. Many people struggle with expressing their authentic creative voice because they've been conditioned to create what others want or what the market demands, rather than what genuinely wants to emerge from them. Advanced authenticity in creativity requires developing trust in your creative impulses even when they don't make logical sense or seem commercially viable. This involves learning to distinguish between authentic creative expression and ego-driven creation. Authentic creativity flows from genuine inspiration, curiosity, or the desire to express something true. Ego-driven creation is motivated by the need for approval, recognition, or validation. Learning to create from your authentic self rather than your ego requires developing sensitivity to these different motivations. Advanced authenticity also involves navigating what researchers call moral complexity, situations where your authentic values conflict with social expectations, or where different authentic values conflict with each other. These are the situations where there's no clear right answer, where any choice will involve some compromise or cost. Developing moral sophistication requires moving beyond simple rule-following to principled decision-making based on your authentic values and careful consideration of consequences. You learn to make difficult choices that honor your integrity even when they're not popular or easy. You develop the capacity to live with the discomfort of moral ambiguity without abandoning your ethical center. Another advanced challenge is maintaining authenticity during periods of transition and uncertainty. When your life is changing rapidly, when you're between identities or roles, when the future is unclear, it can be difficult to know what authentic choices to make. Your authentic self might be evolving faster than your ability to understand and express it. This requires developing what researchers call tolerance for ambiguity, the ability to remain grounded in your core self even when the specifics of your identity or direction are unclear. You learn to make authentic choices based on your current understanding while remaining open to new information and continued evolution. The challenge of authentic aging presents another sophisticated frontier that most people don't consider. As you grow and change throughout your life, your authentic self evolves. What felt authentic at 20 might not feel authentic at 40. What excited you in your 30s might bore you in your 50s. Advanced authenticity requires remaining open to these changes rather than trying to lock yourself into a particular version of yourself. This involves letting go of outdated aspects of your identity that no longer serve you, while honoring the continuity of your core self. It requires developing the wisdom to know which changes represent authentic evolution and which represent reactions to external pressure or internal resistance. Perhaps the most advanced challenge is what I call authentic transcendence, the integration of personal authenticity with something larger than yourself. This might be spiritual practice, service to others, creative expression, or contributing to causes you care about. The challenge is maintaining your authentic individual self while participating in something transpersonal. This requires developing what researchers call self-transcendent authenticity, the ability to be genuinely yourself while also connecting with and serving something beyond your personal interests. It's the recognition that your authentic self includes not just your individual nature, but also your connection to others, to nature, to the divine, or to the larger human project. These advanced challenges require continued growth, learning, and adaptation throughout your life. They're not problems to solve once and forget. They're ongoing areas for development and refinement. Masters of advanced authenticity embrace these challenges as opportunities for continued growth rather than obstacles to overcome. Chapter 14. Living your authentic legacy. How being yourself creates ripples that change the world. Your authenticity is not just about your personal happiness or fulfillment. It's about the contribution you make to the collective evolution of human consciousness. Every time you choose truth over performance, courage over safety, authenticity over approval, you're not just changing your own life, you're creating permission for others to do the same. Understanding the larger impact of your authentic living transforms it from a personal development project into a form of service to the world. Most people underestimate the influence of their authenticity because they focus only on immediate, obvious effects. You express a genuine opinion, and someone disagrees. You set a boundary, and someone gets upset. You pursue an authentic dream and face criticism. These immediate responses can make authenticity feel costly and ineffective. But the real impact of authenticity operates on much longer timescales and in much more subtle ways than most people recognize. Your authenticity creates what systems theorists call non-linear effects, small changes that compound over time into massive shifts. When you stop people-pleasing, you might initially face resistance from people who benefited from your compliance. But over time, some of those people begin to question their own people-pleasing patterns. When you express an unpopular truth, you might initially face criticism, but you also give permission for others who share that truth to express it more freely. The ripple effects of authenticity operate through what researchers call social contagion, the unconscious transmission of emotional states, behaviors, and attitudes through social networks. When you embody certain qualities, authentic confidence, genuine vulnerability, real courage, people around you begin to resonate with those qualities, even if they don't consciously realize it's happening. This is why some people feel more comfortable being themselves around authentic people, even if they've never explicitly talked about authenticity. Your authentic presence creates a field of permission that allows others to access their own authenticity more easily. You become a living demonstration that it's possible to be real in a world that often rewards fakeness. One of the most profound ways your authenticity creates legacy is by changing the definition of success and worthiness in your sphere of influence. When you choose fulfillment over achievement, alignment over approval, truth over comfort, you demonstrate alternative ways of measuring a life well lived. This is particularly powerful if you're in any kind of leadership or influence position, but it happens even in your most intimate relationships. Children who grow up around authentic adults learn that love doesn't have to be earned through performance, that feelings are valid and can be expressed safely, that it's possible to disagree without losing connection. Partners of authentic people often begin to feel safer expressing their own truth. Colleagues of authentic people often find themselves speaking up more freely in meetings or setting boundaries they've never set before. Your authentic living also contributes to what sociologists call cultural evolution, the slow shift in collective values, norms, and possibilities that happens when enough individuals embody new ways of being. Every person who chooses authenticity over conformity slightly increases the probability that others will make similar choices. This is how major cultural shifts happen, not through top-down mandates or mass movements, but through the accumulation of individual choices to live differently. The civil rights movement, women's liberation, environmental consciousness, and acceptance of diverse sexual orientations all began with individuals who chose to live authentically despite social pressure to conform. Your contribution to this collective evolution doesn't require you to become famous, start a movement, or change the world in obvious ways. It just requires you to be consistently, courageously yourself in whatever spheres of influence you naturally inhabit. Your authenticity at work contributes to creating more humane workplace cultures. Your authenticity in your family contributes to healing generational patterns of dysfunction. Your authenticity in your community contributes to creating spaces where others feel safe to be real. The legacy of authenticity also operates through what psychologists call modeling, the unconscious learning that happens when people observe how you handle challenges, express emotions, make decisions, and relate to others. When you handle conflict authentically, when you express vulnerability courageously, when you set boundaries lovingly, you're demonstrating possibilities that others might not have imagined. This modeling effect is particularly powerful with people who are younger or less experienced than you. But it happens at every level. When you show up authentically in difficult situations, you expand other people's sense of what's possible in their own difficult situations. When you pursue an authentic path despite obstacles, you increase other people's courage to pursue their own authentic paths. Your authentic living also creates legacy through what I call permission amplification. When you give yourself permission to be real, you unconsciously grant that same permission to others. When you refuse to apologize for your authentic nature, you help others stop apologizing for theirs. When you celebrate your unique gifts, instead of trying to fit in, you inspire others to celebrate their own uniqueness. This permission amplification often happens without any explicit conversation about authenticity. People simply feel more free to be themselves around you, and they often don't even know why. Your authentic presence creates a field of acceptance that allows others to relax their performance and connect with their own truth. The legacy of authenticity extends beyond individual relationships to institutional change. When enough people within organizations, communities, or cultures begin living authentically, those systems begin to shift to accommodate and support authenticity. Workplaces develop more flexible policies. Families develop healthier communication patterns. Communities become more inclusive and accepting of diversity. This institutional evolution happens slowly and often imperceptibly, but it's driven by the accumulation of individual authentic choices. Every time you choose truth over politics at work, you contribute to creating a culture where truth-telling becomes safer. Every time you choose vulnerability over invulnerability in relationships, you contribute to creating relationships where emotional authenticity becomes more normal. Your authentic living also creates what researchers call intergenerational transmission of values. The way you live becomes part of what you pass on to the next generation, whether through your own children, students, mentees, or simply younger people who observe your life. The patterns you embody become the patterns they consider possible for their own lives. This is why authentic living is ultimately an act of love for future generations. When you choose to heal your own patterns instead of perpetuating them, when you choose growth over safety, when you choose truth over convenience, you're creating a legacy that will influence people you may never meet. The most profound aspect of authentic legacy is that it continues beyond your own lifetime through the people you've influenced, who influence others. Your authentic living becomes part of a chain of permission and possibility that extends far beyond your personal sphere and far beyond your personal timeline. Understanding this larger impact doesn't mean you should live authentically for others rather than for yourself. True authenticity must be chosen for its own sake, not for its effects. But recognizing the ripple effects of your authentic choices can provide additional motivation during challenging times when the personal benefits feel insufficient. When you understand that your authenticity is contributing to the evolution of human consciousness, that your courage to be yourself is creating permission for countless others to be themselves, that your refusal to settle for a small life is expanding what others consider possible for their lives, authentic living becomes not just a personal journey, but a form of service to the collective human project of becoming more conscious, more loving, more real. Chapter 15. The Never-Ending Journey. Mastering the Art of Continuous Authentic Evolution. Authenticity is not a destination you arrive at. It's a way of traveling through life. There is no final moment when you become perfectly authentic and then coast on that achievement. Your authentic self continues to evolve as you have new experiences, develop new capabilities, encounter new challenges, and discover new depths within yourself. Mastering authenticity means becoming skilled at the ongoing process of staying aligned with who you're becoming rather than who you used to be. This understanding fundamentally changes how you approach authentic living. Instead of trying to figure out your authentic self once and then live from that fixed identity, you learn to develop a dynamic relationship with your evolving truth. You become curious about who you're becoming rather than attached to who you've been. You learn to surf the waves of change rather than trying to stop the ocean. The journey of continuous authentic evolution requires what researchers call psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt your behavior and identity to match your changing circumstances while maintaining your core integrity. This is different from the rigid consistency that many people mistake for authenticity. True authenticity includes the flexibility to grow, change, and express different aspects of yourself as your life evolves. This evolutionary perspective requires letting go of what psychologists call the fixed self-concept, the belief that your personality, preferences, and identity are stable and unchanging. While your core values and essential nature may remain relatively consistent, the ways you express and live those values will continue to evolve throughout your life. Who you are authentically at 20 is different from who you are authentically at 40, 50, or 70. Embracing this evolutionary nature of authenticity means developing comfort with identity fluidity. You might discover interests you never knew you had, develop capabilities you never imagined possible, or feel called to make changes that surprise even yourself. Instead of resisting these changes or trying to maintain consistency with your past self, you learn to trust your evolution and follow where it leads. This requires developing what I call evolutionary courage, the willingness to become who you're meant to be, even if that person is different from who you've been. Many people resist their own growth because it threatens their familiar sense of self or challenges others' expectations of who they are. Evolutionary courage means choosing growth over comfort, becoming over being, evolution over stagnation. One of the most important skills in continuous authentic evolution is learning to distinguish between authentic growth and reactive change. Authentic growth emerges from your deepening self-understanding, expanding consciousness, and evolving values. Reactive change is driven by external pressures, the need to escape discomfort, or the desire to be someone other than who you are. Learning to recognize this difference helps you embrace authentic evolution while avoiding unnecessary upheaval. The journey of continuous evolution also requires developing what researchers call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking and growth patterns. You become aware, not just of who you are, but of how you change. What triggers your growth? What patterns of development characterize your unique journey? This self-awareness helps you navigate your evolution more skillfully. As you mature in your authentic journey, you'll encounter what I call evolutionary challenges, transitions that require you to release outdated versions of yourself to make room for who you're becoming. These might include career changes that require new identities, relationship changes that challenge old patterns, or life transitions that call forth previously undeveloped aspects of yourself. These evolutionary challenges often feel like identity crises because they require letting go of familiar aspects of yourself. The version of you that thrived in your 20s might not be the version that's meant to flourish in your 40s. The identity that served you in one life phase might become limiting in another. Learning to navigate these transitions skillfully is a crucial aspect of authentic mastery. The ongoing journey of authenticity also involves what I call depth excavation, the continuing process of discovering deeper layers of yourself. Even after years of authentic living, you'll continue to find aspects of yourself that were previously hidden, suppressed, or undeveloped. These discoveries might challenge your existing self-concept and require integration of new aspects of your identity. This depth excavation often happens through life experiences that stretch you beyond your familiar comfort zones. Crisis, loss, love, parenthood, aging, success, failure. These experiences can reveal aspects of yourself that you never knew existed. Instead of seeing these revelations as disruptions to your authentic self, you learn to see them as gifts that deepen your self-understanding. The mastery of continuous evolution also requires developing what researchers call temporal integration, the ability to honor your past while remaining open to your future. This means maintaining appreciation for who you've been and the journey that brought you here, while not being trapped by past identities or achievements. You learn to carry the wisdom of your experience without carrying the limitations of your history. As your authentic journey matures, you'll also develop what I call evolutionary discernment, the wisdom to know which changes represent authentic growth and which represent avoidance, rebellion, or grass is greener thinking. Not every impulse to change is authentic evolution. Sometimes, the most authentic choice is to stay committed to a path even when it becomes challenging. Learning to distinguish between authentic evolution and reactive escape is a sophisticated skill that develops over time. The ongoing nature of authentic living also means that your relationship with authenticity itself will evolve. In the beginning, authenticity might feel effortful, scary, or revolutionary. As you mature in your practice, it becomes more natural, integrated, and easeful. Eventually, authenticity isn't something you do, it's simply who you are. This evolution in your relationship with authenticity includes developing what I call effortless integrity, the point where being authentic requires less energy than being inauthentic. Your authentic self becomes so integrated and natural that performing or pretending feels foreign and uncomfortable. You reach a point where authenticity isn't a choice you have to make. It's simply your default way of being. The advanced stages of authentic living also involve what researchers call self-transcendent authenticity, where your individual authentic expression becomes integrated with service to something larger than yourself. Your authenticity stops being primarily about personal fulfillment and becomes about contributing your unique gifts to the world. You realize that being fully yourself is not a selfish act but a generous one, because the world needs what only you can offer. This transcendent stage includes understanding that your individual authenticity is part of a larger collective evolution toward more conscious, more loving, more real ways of being human. Your commitment to being yourself becomes part of your commitment to the healing and evolution of the world. The never-ending journey of authentic living ultimately becomes a spiritual path, a way of honoring the sacred uniqueness of your existence, while contributing to the collective awakening of human consciousness. You realize that learning to be yourself isn't just a psychological process. It's a spiritual practice that connects you more deeply with the mystery of existence itself. As you continue on this journey, you develop what I call evolutionary faith, the trust that your authentic path is unfolding as it should, that your growth and changes are serving some larger purpose, that becoming who you really are is worth whatever it costs. This faith sustains you through difficult transitions, uncertain periods, and the ongoing challenges of staying true to yourself in a world that often rewards conformity. The mastery of continuous authentic evolution means that you never stop growing, never stop discovering, never stop becoming. You remain curious about yourself throughout your entire life, excited to see who you'll become next, eager to discover what new aspects of your authenticity will emerge. You understand that the journey of becoming yourself is the adventure of a lifetime, and you wouldn't trade it for any amount of safety, comfort, or conventional success. This is the ultimate freedom, to be continuously, courageously, authentically yourself throughout all the changes and challenges of life. To remain true to who you are while embracing who you're becoming. To live from your deepest truth while staying open to discovering even deeper truths. To be fully human in all its complexity, contradiction, and magnificent possibility. The journey never ends because you never stop evolving. And that's not a limitation. It's the greatest gift of being alive. You get to spend your entire existence discovering and becoming yourself. You get to contribute your unique thread to the great tapestry of human experience. You get to be part of the ongoing creation of a more authentic, more conscious, more loving world. The question isn't whether you'll ever master authenticity completely. The question is whether you'll commit to the ongoing journey of becoming more yourself, more real, more true, with each passing day. Because in the end, the journey of authentic living isn't about reaching a destination. It's about falling in love with the process of becoming who you've always been meant to be.